All right, so Joe had some questions, and I, Joe, shall answer Joe's questions. So roughly, this amounted to some difficulty getting a decorator to work, but it was an interesting enough kind of splicing example that I thought it would be good to talk about anyways. So our goal is to write a function that averages a list of numbers that the user puts in. So the user is not going to put in a Python type list, right? They're going to enter some comma separated values. So that's my goal. And to that end, I've imported a couple of things. So I went out into my repels and found, or into previous code, like I went looking around, and I found that I had written this isInteger function a while back, and this thing just takes a string input and returns true or false based on whether or not the string input is an integer. Basically, it checks whether everything in it's a number. If that's true, it returns true because it's actually a positive number, right? Like 0 or some other number. Otherwise, if it starts with a minus sign, then it checks that same question for the rest of the string, right? So integers are either 0 and positive, or they start with a minus sign. It should be noted that this will return true for -0, which is in fact an integer. It's just a weird one. And then I also have this verbose function decorator that what this thing does is it just tells me which function's running on what arguments. And that's basically just because, I don't know, because I want to use this, I guess. All right, so let me start by defining my function. I'm going to define a function. I'm going to call it averager. Averager. Okay, and it's going to take no inputs, and I'm going to wrap it in the with verbose decorator. So I'm just going to give it the with verbose decorator even before I do anything with it. So let me just double check that I got something working here. Okay, so I got something maybe working. I need to call this thing. Okay, so this should really just print that we're getting test and we're getting no inputs. Okay, cool. So I'm getting that we're running it on nothing and that we're testing. Cool. And it should be noted that my verbose thing has some arrows. I don't remember why I put those in there, but I did. Probably because I was running it in a loop or something. Okay. So now I would like to do, oh yeah, let's actually make two functions. Should we make two functions or should we just make one? I guess I said in the doc that I was going to create a function. Well, in that case, this verbose thing's probably not necessary. Now what the hell? Okay. All right, so in here, let's see, I no longer really need my test print. In here, what I want to do is I want to get a list of stuff from the user, right? So I'm gonna make an explicit string. So I'm gonna say the user's input as a string, right? Is input, and the prompt's gonna be something like provide a comma separated list of numbers to average. And we should probably throw a new line at the end of that. Okay. And then just for diagnostics without caps lock on, let's print that user string. So let's just run this. I'm going to get tired of looking at my verbose thing, so I'm going to shut that off for just a minute. Okay, so, okay, cool. So we're providing a comma separated list of numbers to average. Now, I'm going to need some stuff. So the first thing I'm going to need is to, oops, that went to the wrong place. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to need to do is go Google some stuff. Okay, so the thing I'm going to go Google is I need a string method, and I need to slice based on where those commas are, right? So I'm going to have kind of a couple of thoughts here. My first thought is going to be, okay, so first thought is I'm getting this kind of comma separated list, right? So that's going to look like 254, 8,768, oops, maybe 23, 76. Okay, so I need to first cut things based on these commas. Cut on commas. Put into list, maybe? Something like that. Right, so I want to cut this thing up based on where the commas are. Now, that list, if I put it into a list, I think I can get it in a list pretty easily, is going to maybe have these spaces in it. See how there's like a space right here before 23? I don't really want that space there. So then I'm going to need to go through the list and remove white space. Right? So I'm going to remove all these spaces that are in here. And then we'll actually compute the average. Okay. Seem like a game plan so far? And the great thing is, Python's kind of like pseudocode you can execute, right? So I just need to figure out how exactly to cut on commas and put it into a list. So I'm just going to Google Python string methods. Yeah, so I like this W3 schools thing. You can see I go here fairly often. Okay, let's see. So join is the opposite of this. Join is how you would stick things together with a comma. Split. Splits the string. So there's rsplit and split. I'm not sure what the difference is. Splits into a list. Okay, cool. So that looks like a legit option. So I think we're just going to cut it up on commas. So let's see. So let's call that user list. It's going to be user string dot split. Right, so I'm going to call the split method on the string that I've got, and I want to split based on commas. So let's just print that out and see what we get. All right, so let's hit run. Comma separated list is 1, 2, 3, comma 4, comma 5, comma 6, comma. Oh, that one's gonna be bad. That one should kick an error. Just even if I had this working, that should kick an error, right? Okay. And oops, last one is 1, 2, 3. Okay. So if I hit enter. Okay, cool. So I can see that I'm getting spaces. I got the one space that I had between what? Oh, between 4 and 5 I had a space. Oh, and there's another one right here at the front of 45. Okay. Actually, this is going pretty good. Okay, so there's my comma separated list. Now, we probably need to go through and cut out spaces. Okay, so I need a space method. Okay, so replace would do it. The strip methods would do it. Let me look at a strip. So remove spaces at the beginning and end of the string. Okay, so that would be one option. Another option we could use is we could just use the replace. And there might be good reasons for these. I'm going to use the strip one. because I really want, if the user hits space in the middle, I want it to be weird. Okay, so go through the list and remove the white space. So I'm going to do for item in user list. So we're going to go through the items that are in the user list, and we're going to do item is item dot. Ooh, there's a reasonable question about whether this will keep them in the list or not. Let's see if this works. It probably won't. Okay, so item is item dot strip. Okay, so oops. And I probably want to print out my user list. Now, my guess is that this is actually not going to work. Let's see why. 1, 2, comma, 43, comma, 400. Yeah, whatever. See how the spaces are still there? So the spaces are still there because even though I saved this over top of the items aren't then saved in the list. Right, so I want to save them in the list. And yeah, this is as good a time as any to learn list comprehension. So a list comprehension way to do this would be to say, all right, I want to make user list into item dot strip for item in user list. Okay, so what this is doing is this is saying user list, right, is going to be a list made of item.strips for items in the user list. So this is going to go through my list and it's going to save over top of itself, right? And what it's going to do is it's going to save over top of itself a list where the items have all been stripped. So I provide my comma separated list. Okay, and so I have the one with all the spaces, and then all the spaces are gone. Okay, cool. This is a thing called list comprehension. It's a pretty useful tool to know. I haven't explicitly covered it probably in any of the videos, so that might be a little new. Another way you could do this is you could like loop through them and save them into a different list, and then talk about the different list. I'm just going to use this, oops, because I think it's cool. Okay, so we went through the list and we removed white space, and then we want to compute the average. Oh, first we should probably check and see if they're all numbers. Let's see. So basically what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to think of whether it would be better to write a separate function to check and see if they're all numbers, or if I should just use my isInt function. I think I'm going to split this logic out. So I'm going to go into my isInt module, right? And I've already got my isInt string. So right now what this does is this takes a string. So I'm just going to copy, well, I'm going to copy some of this. So I'm going to copy this top part. And I'm going to do, I'm going to expect for this thing to get a list. So I'm going to call the list is int. And so this is going to return true or false if the list argument is all integers. Okay, so the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to say for item in list. Oh, and I really shouldn't call this list. This is a really shitty naming convention. Actually, calling this string was a shitty naming convention too. So I'm just going to call this provided list. So for items in the provided list, what we're going to do is we're going to say if yeah, so if not is int of item, return false. So what this is doing, right, is this is going to go through the list, and if any of the items isn't an integer, it's going to return false. Does that make sense? If the list of strings argument is all integers. So if any one of them fail the isn't check, then this is going to quit. It's going to return false. It's going to say they're not all integers, and that's going to be the end of it. If it gets to the end, then it can return true because it got to the end and they were all they all passed the isn't check. Cool. So then in my main method, I can forget importing isn't. I just need to import list isn't. Okay, so to check and see if they're all integers, then we'll call list is int on user list. And what I actually want to do is do if list is int on user list, right? So if they're all integers, then what I can do is I can typecast them all to integers. So I'm going to say numbers is, and then I'm going to do the same list comprehension thing, right? So I'm going to make some square braces, and I'm going to say that it's item dot, not item dot, integer of item, right? So I'm going to convert them to integers for item in user list. Okay, so now I've made a new list called numbers, right? And it's telling me that is assigned but never used. Okay, good. I haven't used it yet. Okay, so let's see if we can print that out. Okay, and then the else for this, we're going to want to do something like, I don't know, we could raise an error, we could try to loop this thing back through. For right now, I'm just going to simply print out just a little, like, I'm going to print out invalid argument provided. All right, so it's just going to go ahead and that'll quit the program, right? It's going to hit the end of the program. Okay, fine. And then invalid syntax. Oh, sorry, I'm writing JavaScript today. That would be if not is int. Okay, so I'm just going to throw one that shouldn't give me anything. Okay, good. Invalid argument provided. It did. I didn't have any spaces to strip off anyways. Let's do 1, 2, 3. Oh, that one's going to be a problem. Let me put a comment there. Okay, so there's strings with spaces, then there's strings without spaces, then there are numbers. Ooh, perfect. And I guess we can break this too. Actually, let's just return 0. You could return none there. It's probably easiest to return 0. Okay. That would be saying, right, that if they put in a list that wasn't all numbers, what's the average? I don't freaking know. Here. Now, in terms of my next step, I need to actually compute the average. And so in order to compute the average, I want to do something like total equals, right? And let's just explicitly loop through our array. So we're going to do for number in numbers. Total plus equals number. And let me. Okay, so in order to compute the average, we should probably declare some things. So total thus far is 0, and count thus far is 0. In other words, we have no numbers totaling nothing. And then we're going to go through the numbers in the list, and we're going to do total, add the number, and we'll do count plus equals 1. There are other ways to get at what the count is. Using a length attribute would be 1. I'm just going to do it this way because that makes sense to me explicitly. All right, so let's, and then we should probably print out our average. And the average is going to be given with a formatted string. So the average is some braces, maybe a space, I like spaces. And the average needs to be total divided by count. Okay, so let's try this thing out a little. Oops. That's not where periods go. Periods go inside there. All right. So in order to get our list, I'm going to do 2 and 4. Okay, so they had spaces, right? So we split the list, or we split the string based on the commas. So now we got this list with spaces. Then we split the spaces out of each element. Then we converted them all to numbers, and then we calculated the average. What if we give this a thing that's not, yep, good, cool. What if we provide some kind of bigger numbers? Invalid argument provided. Oh, see the one with this space here? That one is not a number. Ergo, I got an invalid argument provided. I think that's safer than splitting the space out because I probably meant to type a comma there. But you know, your users are your users. So let's average 12 and -8. Let's see. 12 plus -8 is 4, and split by 2 things is 2.0. Cool. So I think this is working-ish. And we probably want to actually return our average. So we're going to return total over count. And then we need one last thing, which is to provide a doc string for this guy. So my doc string for my averager should tell me okay, so this thing takes no arguments. Actually, I guess I should say maybe more explicitly that this gets a comma separated list from the user of integers from the user computes the average. And then I might have some like notes in here, right? And so my notes are that it takes no arguments. I think that's a valuable thing to know about my function here. It won't raise an error if they input an invalid list. So I maybe won't write that it doesn't explicitly raise an error, but I'm going to write something like returns 0 in the case of a list including non-integers. Int edgers. There we go. Alright. And I've got my things kind of going here. Let's see. I think stylistically, I need a couple of breaks there. I never did use the verbose decorator, basically because this thing wasn't taking an argument, and so it wasn't really worthwhile. If I had wanted to pass this explicitly, I think I probably would have written two functions here. Maybe one to get the user input and then another one to do the averaging. Then it would have been interesting. Otherwise, it just wasn't interesting to figure out what the arguments were because there aren't any arguments. We can see that if we run it, we just get that it's running averager on the arguments, nothing, right? So it's not really a particularly interesting decorator right now. All right, I think that should do it.